The Titanic carried over 2,200 souls into the Atlantic. But one small boy's survival would become a story the world would never forget. The year was 1912, and the world was buzzing with excitement over a ship like no other, RMS Titanic. It was called the Unsinkable, a floating palace carrying the richest of the rich, hopeful immigrants and families chasing a brighter future. Among the more than 2,200 passengers was a young boy, barely 12 years old, traveling with his mother from England to America. His father had gone ahead months earlier, searching for work, and now it was their turn to cross the Atlantic and reunite with him. For the boy, the Titanic felt like a dream. The grand staircase glowed under golden lamps, and the long corridors seemed endless. He stared wide-eyed at the chandeliers, the music rooms, and the bustling dining halls. His mother held his hand tightly, whispering, "Remember this, my son. You are seeing history," but beneath the laughter, the music, and the chatter of travelers, there was an uneasy silence in the boy's heart. The ship was magnificent, yes, but the ocean that surrounded it was darker and more endless than anything he had ever imagined. At night, when he lay in his small bunk, he would press his ear to the thin walls and listen. The groan of the engines, the rush of waves, and the icy wind whistling past the porthole made him shiver. On the evening of April 14, 1912, the boy noticed the air had grown colder than ever before. Passengers bundled themselves in coats as a sharp chill swept the decks. The boy looked at his mother, who whispered a prayer under her breath. The Titanic cut through the freezing Atlantic waters at full speed, its lights glowing like a castle drifting through the night. Then came the sound. A faint jolt, like a shiver through the metal bones of the ship. Dishes rattled. Some passengers laughed nervously, thinking nothing of it. But the boy felt his mother's grip tighten. Crewmen hurried through the corridors, faces pale. Within minutes, rumors began to spread. The ship had struck something. The boy followed his mother up toward the deck. The night sky was filled with stars, sharper and brighter than he had ever seen, but the sea below looked black and endless. In the distance, huge shards of white ice floated, silent and terrifying. His mother pulled him close, whispering, "Stay with me, no matter what happens." What none of them yet knew was that history had just changed forever. The great ship Titanic, the Unsinkable, had been mortally wounded, and the boy's fate would soon hang in the balance between life and death. At first, no one believed the Titanic could be in real danger. Passengers whispered, laughed nervously, and asked questions the crew refused to answer. The boy clutched his mother's hand, feeling her pulse race faster than his own. The air was sharp and icy, biting at their faces as they stepped onto the open deck. Somewhere far below, the engines groaned like a wounded beast. Stewards moved through the corridors telling everyone to remain calm. Some families obeyed, dressing their children in coats and hats, while others returned to their cabins, convinced the commotion was only temporary. The boy's mother, however, had a sense that something was terribly wrong. She insisted they remain on deck, even as some passengers joked about a little iceberg scratch. Then the tilt began. Subtle at first, like the floor was not quite level. A glass slid across a table and shattered. The boy's eyes widened as he realized the ship was sinking slowly, but undeniably sinking. His mother knelt down, fixing his scarf tighter around his neck, her eyes filled with fear she tried to hide. A sharp sound echoed through the night, the order to lower the lifeboats. Crewmen rushed to uncover the wooden boats, their voices trembling as they shouted commands. Some passengers resisted, demanding answers. "This ship cannot sink," shouted a well-dressed gentleman. But the truth was already spreading like fire. There were not enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The boy watched as women and children were gathered first. His mother held him close, whispering, "Remember, you must be brave. Whatever happens, never let go of hope." The boy tried to swallow his fear, But as he glanced over the railing, he saw the ocean below black, endless, and merciless. Screams began to rise from the lower decks as cold seawater poured in. Lights flickered, and the band, stationed on the upper deck, began to play music, a calm melody meant to soothe the crowd. But for the boy, the sound felt haunting, like a final farewell. A lifeboat was lowered nearby, women climbing in hurriedly. His mother pushed him forward, whispering to the crewman, "Please, take him. He is only a child." The boy's heart pounded. He didn't want to leave her. He clung to her coat, crying, but she bent down, kissed his forehead, and said words he would never forget. "Live, my son. For both of us." Hands grabbed him, lifting him into the lifeboat. The boy screamed for his mother, reaching out, but she only smiled through tears as the lifeboat was lowered into the freezing night. Around him, other children and women sobbed quietly, their eyes reflecting the glow of the great ship above, tilting further and further into the sea. The Titanic was dying, and the boy had just been torn away from the one person he loved most. The lifeboat creaked as it was lowered into the frozen Atlantic, ropes straining and splashing icy water onto the frightened passengers. The boy sat on the wooden bench, his small hands gripping the side of the boat until his knuckles turned white. His mother's figure grew smaller above him, standing on the deck of the Titanic, framed by the glow of the ship's flickering lights. He wanted to scream for her, to climb back, but the lifeboat had already touched the surface of the ocean. The sea was mercilessly cold. Waves slapped against the boat, rocking it like a toy. Around him, women wept quietly, clutching their children, whispering prayers into the night. Some refused to look back, too terrified of what they might see. But the boy couldn't take his eyes away. The Titanic loomed above them, massive and defiant, yet sinking lower by the minute. From the lifeboat, the boy saw figures scrambling on deck, shadows rushing, some jumping into the sea in blind panic. Their screams echoed across the water, chilling him more than the freezing wind ever could. Then came the sound, an awful twisting groan of metal tearing apart. The Titanic's bow plunged deeper, pulling the stern high into the air like a giant beast fighting for its last breath. Lights blinked and went out, plunging parts of the ship into darkness. For a moment, the boy thought the world itself was ending. Someone in the lifeboat began to cry out, "God help them." Another woman covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. The boy's chest tightened. He felt like his heart was being ripped apart as he searched the decks, above for his mother. He saw her only once more standing near the railing, hands clasped as if in prayer. She did not scream, she did not run. She stood with a calm dignity, her eyes fixed on the stars above, as though already preparing for heaven. The boy shouted her name, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Moments later, the ship gave a final roar, a thunderous explosion of sound as its massive frame broke apart. The stern rose high, black against the moonlit sky, before crashing down with a force that sent waves rolling toward the lifeboat. The boy clung to the edge, nearly thrown into the freezing water as screams pierced the night. All around, bodies splashed into the ocean, men, women, children thrashing desperately before the cold silenced them. The lifeboat rocked violently, but the crew urged everyone to stay still, to hold on. Then silence. The Titanic was gone. All that remained was the black sea, scattered debris, and the cries of those left struggling in the water. The boy trembled uncontrollably, tears blurring his vision. His mother was gone, swallowed by the Atlantic, along with more than 1,000 souls. In that moment, the boy realized he was truly alone. But her words echoed in his mind, "Live, my son." The night after the Titanic sank was unlike anything the boy could have imagined. The lifeboat drifted aimlessly on the black Atlantic, surrounded by silence that felt heavier than the roar of the sinking ship. The screams had faded, leaving only the sound of waves lapping against wood and the faint whimper of children too exhausted to cry any longer. The boy's body shook uncontrollably. His thin coat was soaked through, and every breath felt like knives cutting into his chest. He hugged himself, trying to hold on to what little warmth he had left. Around him, women sat motionless, some staring blankly into the darkness, others whispering prayers into the night air. The ocean seemed endless. No horizon, no rescue ships, only the cold moonlight reflecting off the water like shards of broken glass. The boy glanced at the faces around him, faces pale, terrified, and hollow. One woman reached out to pull him close, wrapping her shawl over his shoulders. She whispered, "You'll be all right, dear. Hold on, morning will come." But morning felt like a dream. Hours passed like years. The boy's teeth chattered, his lips cracked from the cold. He closed his eyes and saw his mother's face, the calm expression she had worn in those final moments, her hands clasped in prayer. Her last words repeated in his mind like a heartbeat. "Live, my son. For both of us." Suddenly, a sound cut through the stillness. A faint cry from another lifeboat in the distance. Heads turned, straining their ears. The boy's heart leapt. They were not alone. Other boats bobbed across the waves, scattered like ghosts. Some carried survivors. Others drifted empty, their passengers swallowed by the sea. The boy's boat rowed slowly, the crew too weak and frozen to move quickly. They dared not bring in those clinging to debris, afraid the boat would capsize. The boy looked into the dark water, where hands occasionally surfaced, reaching desperately before vanishing beneath the icy waves. His small fists clenched. He wanted to help, but he was powerless. Time dragged on. The night grew colder, the stars sharper in the sky. And then at the edge of the horizon he saw it. A faint light. Tiny, distant, but unmistakable. A flare shot into the sky, bursting in white brilliance against the black canvas of night. Hope surged through the lifeboat. Survivors stirred, whispers of salvation spreading. The boy's chest tightened. Was it real? Or just another cruel trick of the ocean? He dared not blink, afraid the light would vanish. But as the minutes passed, more flares appeared. There was a ship out there. Rescue was coming. The boy pressed his hands together, whispering his mother's words as if she were still beside him. Live. For both of us. The night was not yet over, but for the first time since the Titanic sank, the boy believed he might see the sun rise again. Hours crawled by, each one colder than the last. The boy could no longer feel his hands or feet. His body was weak, his head heavy, but he forced himself to keep staring at the horizon. The faint light in the distance had grown stronger, and now there was no doubt it was a ship. Hope spread through the lifeboat like fire and dry grass. Women sat up straighter, children clutched their mothers, and even the crew found new strength to row. The boy's heart pounded, but fear still gnawed at him. What if the ship passed them by? What if help never reached them in time? The sky began to pale with the first signs of dawn, the black night slowly giving way to a cold gray morning. And then, at last, the rescuing vessel appeared in full sight. It was the Carpathia, steaming through the icy waters, pushing aside chunks of ice as it made its way to the lifeboats. The boy's chest tightened with relief and sorrow all at once. He was alive, yes, but his mother was not beside him to see this moment. He imagined her voice, whispering again, "Live, my son." For both of us. Those words steadied him, keeping him strong as the lifeboat approached the towering side of the ship. Crew members from the Carpathia threw down ropes and ladders. One by one, survivors were lifted up, their weak bodies trembling from exhaustion and cold. The boy's turn came. Rough but gentle hands pulled him aboard. He collapsed on the deck, shivering uncontrollably, his small body wrapped quickly in blankets by nurses, who rushed from one survivor to the next. Around him, people sobbed tears of relief, tears of loss. Some clung to strangers, Others called out names that were never answered. The boy sat quietly, his lips blue, his eyes searching the crowd one last time for his mother. But she was gone. Instead, he looked up at the rising sun. The golden light spread across the ocean, banishing the shadows of the night. He was alive. He had survived what so many had not. And though the pain of loss pressed heavy on his heart, he carried with him the strength of his mother's final gift, her command to keep living. For the boy, survival was not just his own. It was hers too. And as the Carpathia sailed toward New York, filled with broken but breathing survivors, he held on to the memory of that night and the promise that he would never forget. The boy never forgot the night the Titanic sank. Even as the years passed and he grew into a man, the memory of the freezing water, the cries in the dark, and above all the last words of his mother remained carved deep inside him. When people asked about that night, he spoke not just of tragedy, but of courage. He told them how strangers comforted each other in the lifeboats, how crew members gave their lives so that others could survive, and how a mother's love gave him the strength to go on. Each retelling was painful, but also necessary. He wanted the world to know that the Titanic was not only a story of loss, it was a story of human spirit, of sacrifice, and of survival against impossible odds. Decades later, when his hair had turned gray and his hands trembled with age, he would still sit quietly at times, closing his eyes, hearing once more his mother's voice. "Live, my son." For both of us. And he had. He had lived a full life, carrying her memory like a flame that never went out. The Titanic sank into the ocean in 1912, but the boy who survived carried its story across generations, reminding the world that even in the darkest waters, hope can still rise, like the dawn after the longest night.
Thanks you for watch. Every old story holds a lesson worth remembering. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe for watch and listen more old times, real stories, and don't forget,